In the opening scene, we see the vastly different mornings of Jonathan and Liberty. While he wakes up in his penthouse in the center of the city, Liberty struggles to get up from her old bed. The successful lawyer prepares himself a shot of espresso, while Liberty searches her trash can for the used coffee filter. Regardless, both of them get dressed and head to work, although Liberty considers it a hobby. Arriving at the office, Jonathan is greeted by Rosemary, who tells him the schedule for the day. And on the other side of the city, we see Liberty arriving at a spa center that's owned by her best friend. Feeling relieved as she sees Liberty walking in, she lets her know that they have a busy day ahead. Given that there are a lot of massage appointments, Tessa begs her to get a license so she can work with her, but Liberty claims to be content with her receptionist job. Besides, she reveals to be doing on the weekend and doing catering. Pretty serious, right? Even her best friend struggles to understand her unserious approach to life. In the afternoon, Rosemary stops by Jonathan's office to remind him of the event he has to attend. However, he claims to be too busy to be attending events. Rosemary sighs, worrying that he will never find love because he's always in his office. When it comes to love, Jonathan is not a big fan, and he makes it known as he states that true love is for fairy tales and animated movies. However, he decides to make her happier by revealing that he has a blind date set up in the evening. She gets excited for a second, but becomes disappointed once she hears that the date has been arranged by his best friend Nick. Out of nowhere, he appears in the office and tries to defend himself. Just like Jonathan, Nick doesn't seem to believe in true love and is more excited about the fact that his best friend will be going out with a high-profile woman. Rosemary argues, but ends up resting her case since she can't prove her point to the boys. As the best friends are making plans for the evening, we see Liberty at the center, having a blast at a party with the elderly. In the evening, Jonathan arrives at the meeting just before Liberty arrives at the same hotel. She is rushing to get to catering, so they end up entering the same elevator. They start going up when the lights start to flicker, and it suddenly stops. The employees take note of the situation, but Jonathan tries to call them personally. Unfortunately, his phone doesn't seem to have any service, so he asks Liberty to check hers. She admits to not having one, with the argument that people used to live without them. Surely a good argument, right? Some time passes and the elevator hasn't even moved, so it's becoming claustrophobic. To ease the uncomfort, Liberty suggests they introduce themselves. He becomes quite interested in her unique name, but the story behind it impresses him even more. Eventually, they get to the topic of Jonathan's job, and Liberty lets him know how boring it sounds, with which he surprisingly agrees. He even admits that hearing a different opinion from what he's used to is quite refreshing for him. The elevator is still unfixed, and consequently, a lot of people gather in the lobby. An employer lets them know that their bags will be carried if they take the stairs, but none of them even move. In the elevator, Jonathan opens up about his childhood surprisingly. When Liberty asks whether it's been a childhood dream of his to become a lawyer, he opens up about losing his father at a young age and how he knew that working as a lawyer would be prosperous. Even he surprises himself by opening up, let alone to a stranger, so he asks about her childhood. Similar to him, she reveals that her parents had split up at a young age, so she was raised by a single mother. However, instead of focusing on one thing, she had taken up many activities as a child, a habit that has moved into her adult life. More time passes, but the elevator still isn't fixed. Liberty notices that his tie is messed up, so she offers to fix it. Being close to each other, the tension rises, and both of them feel it. Taking the chance, Jonathan mentions his lack of cooking skills and suggests she give him a lesson. Liberty smiles and assures him that she will consider his offer. Finally, the elevator starts working, and they get to the floor. Before going their ways, Jonathan asks whether they can meet up sometimes for cooking lessons, and she accepts. Coincidentally, they end up in the same room, once again. However, Jonathan is surprised to see that she's the waitress at the event. His work is being honored, which is why he's called on stage. However, as he holds his speech, his eyes keep following Liberty, making it hard to focus. Their evenings pass, but both find themselves struggling to fall asleep because of their interaction. The following evening, we see Jonathan on a date with the woman Nick has set him up with. They mostly talk about work, but do agree on one thing, that they're both achievers and have no time to raise a family. How fun! While they continue agreeing on the topic that a relationship should be more of a partnership between two people who try to make it work, Cynthia ironically asks, when's the last time he's felt a true connection with a girl? His face drops as thoughts start filling his mind about the interaction with Liberty. However, he isn't the only one who feels a connection, because Liberty wastes no time to fill her bestie in on the details. She claims to like him, but given that she's just a part of the help, she doesn't believe that he would even be interested in a girl like her. However, Tessa comes to the rescue, assuming that the interaction might have been his fate for him to question his actions. At the office, Nick can't help but ask Jonathan all about the date with Cynthia. Soon enough, he realizes that Jonathan isn't blown away by Cynthia, so he jokingly assumes that there's someone else on his mind. His eyes widen as Jonathan mentions Liberty, but he falls back on the idea when Jonathan reveals that she's a waitress. The hard-earned success is finally reached, so Nick advises him not to even think about dating a waitress. Instead, to impress Cynthia and his peers, he suggests Jonathan throws a dinner party. Thinking that he's right, Jonathan decides to host the party. As Nick leaves, Rosemary tries to find out more about the elevator girl, but Jonathan thinks it's best he focuses on Cynthia only. Coming up with an idea, Rosemary assures him that if it's meant he'll see her again, and heads to phone the hotel where he got stuck. Just a few hours before the party, Liberty shares the exciting news that she's gotten a gig for the evening with Tessa. Given that she'll need help, Liberty begs Tessa to help her, and even though she doesn't want to, she agrees. And just like that, with the magic of Rosemary, Liberty and Jonathan meet again, but this time at his apartment. Opening the door, Jonathan is shocked to see her, and even drops his papers to the ground. Trying to recover quickly, he lets them in and continues his call. Liberty whispers to Tessa that he's the guy from the elevator, and Tessa becomes convinced that he's orchestrated the whole thing just to apologize to her. Ending his call quickly, Jonathan fixes his tie before heading to the kitchen. He apologizes for the confusion, so Liberty decides to introduce him to Tess. Tess says hi while searching through the cabinets, however. She asks whether he has a vase she can use. Embarrassed, he admits to not having many practical things in his apartment, and Liberty agrees that it's kind of dull. Once again, Tess comes to the rescue as she agrees to get everything to make the apartment more inviting. Left alone, Jonathan takes the chance to apologize for ignoring her at the party, and she accepts his apology. To make it up to her, she suggests he helps her in the kitchen. Handing him an apron, they get to work on the appetizers. After adding a couple of ingredients into a blender and mixing them, Liberty asks him to tell her what they've made. Although he's clueless about the ingredients, once he tastes it, he realizes that they've made hummus. A call for celebration. He opens the fridge and asks her to get the glasses, as they celebrate his first appetizer. Soon enough, the time comes for the party, and the first one to arrive is Nick, with both his and Jonathan's date. Despite overhearing them, Liberty doesn't say anything about him having a date and remains professional until Tessa returns. She serves the freshly made hummus, not forgetting to mention that Jonathan had made it. As she returns to the kitchen, Tessa joins and asks who the blonde girl is. Liberty reveals that she's his date, confusing Tessa even more. Instead of focusing on him and his intentions, Tessa tells Liberty that it's her night to prove herself as a chef, so that should be their focus. Shortly, every guest arrives and the dinner party officially begins. Tessa and Liberty do a wonderful service, keeping Jonathan and the guests satisfied. However, as Liberty cheeks up on the guests out of her caring nature, she catches the attention of Cynthia, who keeps a close eye on her the whole time. By the end of the party, Liberty notices how tired Tess is, so she sends her home earlier. She lets herself out while Jonathan takes the time to write Liberty a check for her service. Left alone again, Jonathan takes the right approach this time and invites her for a drink, where they seem to be having a wonderful time. On Monday, he thanks Rosemary for reconnecting him with Liberty, and she continues acting oblivious as to how they reconnected. However, she can't help but feel happy for him, because he's going on an official date with her, and even advises him to take her to dinner at the hotel where they first met. Later in the afternoon, Jonathan bumps into Cynthia in the lobby. She lets him know she had a wonderful time at the dinner, which is why she suggests they go out in the evening. Already having his feelings set for Cynthia, he admits to not feeling anything towards her, although she acts accordingly. Her friend, who happens to be Nick's girlfriend, decides to call Nick and tell him all about it. Nick immediately rushes to his office, but there's nothing in the world that will keep him from taking Liberty on a date. Before he finishes with work, Rosemary calls him to her desk, where she has a wide selection of ties for him. While choosing one for his date, Rosemary advises him that work isn't everything, but that love is more important. Friday comes, and it's finally time for their first date. As they enjoy dinner, they talk about their childhoods and upbringing. Here we see how different they are. While Jonathan had grown up doing everything to get into a preppy school, Liberty had decided to travel and learn from her experiences. From a sculpting class in Italy to working at a farm in France, Liberty tells him all about her traveling across Europe. He becomes overwhelmed, but decides to raise a toast in her name. They continue their talk while strolling around the resort, getting to know more about each other and their families. By the end of the night, he asks for her to choose where their second date will be, and they seal off their first one with a kiss. Naturally, Liberty tells Tess all about it the following morning. Tessa can't believe that she's even giving a preppy guy like him a chance, but Liberty explains that there's more to him. Similarly, Nick doesn't understand how he likes her and even tries to talk him out of it. But Jonathan assures him that she's not going anywhere because he likes her. While he's off to a meeting, Liberty takes the chance to sneak into the building and find Rosemary. Her smile grows as she finally meets Libby Jonathan likes so much. Liberty expresses her gratitude for the gig and for giving her another chance with Jonathan as well. For that, she bought Rosemary lunch, and Rosemary couldn't be prouder of her choice. Soon enough, their second date comes, and it's obvious that Liberty's planned it. They enjoy a day at the park and even share some passionate kisses. As time goes on, their relationship strengthens and they become comfortable with one another. He gets introduced to her workplace and sometimes stays to help her. And not long goes by before she moves in with him. Smart, right? Well, while introducing her to one of his favorite hobbies, he mentions her father, and tears start falling down her cheeks. Confused, he asks why she's crying, and she admits that her father had left them to pursue his dream. Feeling bad, Jonathan assures her that everyone who meets her would love to have her in their lives. On one of their romantic nights, he takes her back to the hotel where they meet only to surprise her with her favorite chef. Not only that, he's arranged for her to cook with her favorite chef and prepare food not just for them, but for the guests. So, Liberty wastes no time and gets to preparing the delicious food along with her favorite chef, Rebecca. After fulfilling Liberty's biggest wish, the pair stays for dinner and they celebrate by drinking red wine. On their way back, she thanks him for the wonderful and thoughtful gifts once-in-a-lifetime experience. However, he tells her that it doesn't have to be a once-in-a-lifetime experience because Rebecca has liked her so much that she's willing to work with her. A huge smile appears on Liberty's face as he talks about the opportunities she'll have after finishing culinary school. Not only that, he gives her a flirty compliment about the big white hat she'll have to wear, saying that it looks cute on her. She can't help but giggle, feeling excited about the future. As time goes on, the lovebirds spend more and more time together, strengthening their relationship and getting used to each other. Liberty might be having an amazing time in her new relationship, but Tessa is the first one to call her out for neglecting their friendship. She makes it known when Liberty takes her shift, so Tessa can spend some time with her family. However, this time, Liberty is sure of Jonathan, which is why she defends him, claiming that Tessa should get to know him better. Jonathan makes the big step of introducing Liberty to his friend group, among them Cynthia as well. However, despite trying, Liberty finds it hard to engage in the conversation because they keep talking about their law professions. Sipping on her drink, she realizes that it's empty. Being the true gentleman he is, Jonathan gets up to get her a new one while she goes to the ladies' room. Taking the chance of him being alone, Cynthia sneaks to the bar and starts questioning him about Liberty. She doesn't understand why he's with a girl like her, but he assures her that he's very happy. Luckily, Liberty comes back shorty, so Cynthia excuses herself back to the table. Finally left alone, he apologizes for boring her with business talk and promises to keep his attention on her. Tessa decides to finally give Jonathan a chance, but things end up going south. How wonderful! While at Tessa's daughter's birthday party, Jonathan struggles to bond with Tessa's husband. Luckily, he proves to be good with kids as he makes Tessa's daughter smile. While the children are playing in the grass, the two pairs are left to chat. While they're on the topic of cars, Liberty asks Jonathan to share his hobby with the pair. Feeling called out, Jonathan anxiously reveals his hobby and is surprised when Tessa and her husband don't judge him. Despite trying, Jonathan ends up spending the party on his phone, while the other men enjoy each other's company over some beer. By the end of the birthday party, Tessa notices that Jonathan hasn't even let his phone down since getting one call. Having had enough, she tells Liberty that he doesn't seem to having a good time, but Liberty assures her otherwise. Looking over to him, Liberty gets disappointed not only when she sees him on the phone, but also when he gets upset because a child accidentally gets frosting on him. Realization hits her like a rock, and the same can be said about him. While at the firm, he gets chased by Nick, who tells him some bad news. Jonathan had made a crucial mistake in the percentages of a deal, which could cost him his career. Foolishly, Nick blames it on his relationship, guilt-tripping him for falling in love. He knows how passionate Jonathan is when it comes to his work, so he makes it seem like Liberty is the one who's making him make those mistakes. Not only that, but to get better, Nick advises him to end things with her, having no understanding whatsoever. He knows where to hit because we see Jonathan pacing back and forth in his office, rethinking his choices. Rosemary notices that something's on his mind, so she asks whether he's well. Knowing that his advice will help him, he asks her to tell him how to know whether the person you're with is the one for you. Concerned, Rosemary asks whether he and Liberty are having problems, and he claims that his structural life doesn't go with Liberty's free life. They're the complete opposite of each other, which is why Rosemary advises him to compromise with Liberty. In the evening, after visiting his lovely girlfriend, he decides to head home. Before he has the chance to leave, Liberty suggests they go to a game with Tessa and her husband, but he lets her know that he has a meeting. They try settling on a different day, but their schedules don't seem to match. Liberty reveals to be busy during the weekends, doing one gig from each of her hobbies. For no particular reason, he gets upset and asks whether she can pick a job. Unfazed, she tells him that she doesn't feel the need to pick a job, so he claims to be worried about her missing out. She thinks that he's the one missing out, because he spends his whole time planning instead of living in the moment. Realizing that his view on things isn't the same as hers, he lets her know that he doesn't want to argue, and neither does she. They decide to drop the conversation and settle on having lunch the following day. In the afternoon, Liberty gets to his office just in time, but he doesn't seem to be there. Shortly after, he comes running and vividly stressed, so much so that he doesn't notice Liberty there. She knocks on his office, asking Jim for lunch, but he brushes her off rudely. Not saying anything further, Liberty walks off quietly. Luckily, Jonathan realizes his mistake as she doesn't call, so he decides to fix it. With a bouquet in his hands, he appears at Liberty's door and decides to take her somewhere as a surprise. They drive to a town nearby where they have the best burgers ever. After enjoying a feast, they take a stroll through the town stores, and he ends up buying her a picture frame as memorabilia. They end their afternoon by enjoying the sun on a bench, but of course, things only go south from there. Jonathan gets a call from Nick wondering why he missed his meeting. He jumps from the bench, visibly upset, and begins to explain why he's late. Not surprisingly, Nick starts to blame Liberty, but Jonathan asks him to stop. Getting their things, Jonathan rushes to the car while yelling at Liberty about his missed meeting. As they return, he apologizes, but then proceeds to blame her for being irresponsible. He claims that he gets lost in time when he's with her, which is not good considering that he's in a high position at the company. Finding it hard to fight with him, she suggests they break things off, which only makes him furious. He attacks her for not being consistent and for not choosing a path in life, because she only has people in her life who are okay with that. Calling her childish, he accuses her of not having a future, which only pisses her off even more. She strikes back, claiming that he's not enjoying the present because he's only thinking about the future. Life is a beautiful mess, and that's how it should be. Unfortunately, their relationship comes to an end, and both of them seem to be hurt by it. Despite having a huge fight, they can't help but think of how the other person is feeling. While Liberty confides in Tessa, Jonathan focuses on his work and even scores himself a possible promotion that could take him to Japan. Naturally, Rosemary notices that something's wrong, so she decides to take matters into her own hands. Visiting Liberty at work, she asks her to call Jonathan because he's being stubborn. Liberty smiles politely and refuses to call him because she thinks that they aren't right for each other. Not knowing how to help further, Rosemary respects her decision and decides to leave. As soon as she's out the door, Tessa returns to the desk, only to start insulting Jonathan and calling him a quitter. Having had enough, Liberty not only defends him, but decides to quit and show Tessa what a real quitter is. He has his job to focus on, but she spends her days longing for him. One day, as they're packing some old things Liberty has, Tessa comes across the picture frame he had bought her on the day of their breakup. Tessa thinks about throwing it out, but Liberty asks her not to. Finally, she realizes that Jonathan might have been right, so she decides to take matters into her own hands. Just as she's ready for success, Jonathan achieves it by closing in on a deal with his goal client. To celebrate, he asks Rosemary to throw a party, and she knows just who to call. Entering the spa center, Rosemary asks Tessa to help her realize the plan. The time for the party finally comes, so Rosemary helps Jonathan get ready for it. He then gets into his ride and after some time arrives at the hotel where he and Liberty had met. Such a Rosemary move. After greeting some people, Jonathan decides to grab himself a drink when he sees Liberty standing by the table. Surprised to see her, he asks what she's doing at such an event, and she reveals has started her own planning company. He couldn't be happier that she's chosen a direction in her life, and she seems to be happy. Later on, Jonathan has dinner with his boss when he decides to make a drastic change. Thanking his boss for the wonderful opportunity, he lets him know that he's turning down the job offer in Tokyo because he has some business to take care of where they are. Seems like everyone's coming to their senses, including Nick as he apologizes to Liberty for misjudging her, and even claims that she and Jonathan should be together. However, he isn't the only one with that opinion. Cynthia watches as Jonathan comes up to Liberty and notices that there's still love between them. He does approach her to let her know how great she is, but it surprises him that he's the reason behind her planning the company launch. Returning to the tables, he sits next to Cynthia to let her know about his feelings. But luckily, she assures him that all is well. While the party is happening on the upper floor, Rosemary heads down to finalize her plan. As Liberty and Jonathan enter the elevator, Tessa gives Rosemary the green light, and sure enough, the elevator stops. Liberty and Jonathan laugh before agreeing that Rosemary must have stopped the elevator. As expected, the lovebirds end up making up as he tells her that he's planning a life with her. Almost immediately they share a passionate kiss, similar to the one they share on their wedding day, which, of course, is at the hotel. The elevator girl turns into the elevator bride as we see them come out and greet their guests, only to return to the elevator after Liberty throws her bouquet. A unique love story, with an even more unique but happy ending.